Does this asset have the potential to grow, to modify itself, to bring even more value? So to scale your business, or just to have a successful business in general, one of the things that you need to do is build assets. And assets are fundamental. That's what you literally get your return on investment from. That's why there's a measurement called return on assets. And that's very important because the more assets you build, the more successful your business will be, the more money that you'll be making at the end of the day. Now, there's a caveat in terms of how you define assets, because everybody defines assets differently. But I want to share these 5 elements or these 5 factors that you should be taking into consideration when you are deciding whether something is an asset or not. And the more of these 5 factors you have, the more likely it is to be an asset, a valuable asset. Now, there's a scale. You may not have all 5 of these factors, but if you do have 5 of these factors, each one of these, then you know you've actually got a very tangible or intangible valuable asset that you can use to continue to grow your business. Now, if you're looking at your assets and you say, I'm only hitting 1 or 2 of these elements, you got to rethink your strategy. Because I see a lot of people struggling. They're putting a lot of time, effort, money, resources into things, into projects, into initiatives, and sometimes even people, and they're not getting the return. And so they've spent hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars, and 5 or 10 years later, they're wondering, why is their business not scaling? Or why is their business actually failing at that particular point? And I'm of the opinion, just based on my research and experience, is that when you take a look at the stats here, and in Canada, for example, I think it's roughly about 50% of the businesses at the 6 or 7 year mark end up failing. So roughly at about 6 or 7 years, half the businesses out there end up failing. And there's a reason for that. And I always bring it down to management. I think there's some economic conditions as well that have a factor, but it truly is the leadership. And what ends up happening is in a lot of these cases, the leadership is not building assets. They're driving the business. They're trying to grow revenue. They're trying to grow profits, but they're taking a look at something, or they're missing out on something that's very important, and that is asset generation. They're not building effective assets or valuable assets. And here are the 5 factors. The first one is that the asset has to bring value. There has to be some kind of value within this asset. And that value could be anything. If we're taking a look at, maybe it's a sales page, for example, or your website. Well, the value that it brings is that it's bringing some kind of brand awareness. It's there. It's legitimizing your business. If you have a really good website, then you hopefully are getting some kind of result or leads from it or sales from it. But value is very important. It either brings value to you, or brings value to your organization, or brings value to your clients, right? So it either brings value to you as the owner or the leader, brings value to your organization, or brings value to your clients. So there's that level. That's the first part. The second is that there has to be some kind of yield. And that's the whole point of having an asset. There's some kind of return on that asset, ROA. And you have to be able to measure that as well. So if you have a website, but it's not converting to any sales, then you got to rethink that, because there's one factor of that asset which says, yes, it brings value. But the second factor, if it's not yielding anything, if it's not making you money, it's not considered an asset. Very important for you to pay attention to. Now, here is the third factor, is that there's a growth potential. And what I mean by that is you have the ability to grow, or use this asset to grow, or this asset can actually grow itself. And one of the things that I take a look at here is if we consider our people assets, so you have employees, you have leadership team, or whoever it may be, management, are they able to continue to grow, learn, advance their skill set to keep up with the times? Because if you're not able to grow that asset, then that asset eventually becomes stale. And a stale asset is not a valuable asset. So that's another factor to pay attention to. Does this asset have the potential to grow, to modify itself, to bring even more value? That's something to pay particular attention to. The next factor is, do you have control over it? Do you, as a business owner or business leader, have direct control over that asset? You may not have 100% ownership over the asset, but you could have up to 80%, up to 90%. Here's the threshold. You should have at least up to 80% control over that asset. If you don't, then it's a little bit tricky, because if someone else has some control over that asset, then you may not be able to dictate the future of this asset. And here's an interesting one, and I'm kind of on the fence with this when it comes to people, because human capital is an asset. But how valuable is that human capital? I would argue to say it's very valuable, but one of the things that it can be low on in terms of one of these 5 factors is control. You cannot control your staff, whether they stay with your organization or whether they go. That's not something for you that you can control yourself. Yes, if you give them a nice enough package, if you treat them great, you have a great culture, they've become part of your core, you can say, organization, and they trust you and they love working there, they love what they're doing, and the chances of them leaving are low, well, then that kind of goes higher up in that factor and on the scale in terms of being a valuable asset. But most people are not like that. Most people will take something else or will go to a different job or opportunity if there's better elements or factors that are involved there. I always say people are loyal as long as you keep them loyal. And their loyalty can be challenged at times. So you got to pay attention to how you treat your people. Obviously, that's a big factor there. But human capital is a tricky one because you don't have full control over people. But here's how you get past that. So I'll use this example here. If you have a rock star salesperson, and this is very common, you have a rock star salesperson, and salespeople transfer from one organization to another organization very fast, very easily. It's just the nature of the game. And is that person an asset? You might be thinking that, yeah, they're an asset because they're bringing in a whole bunch of money, but that person can easily leave. Here's how you overcome that, is that you get that person to train other people. So if you can take that person and multiply the great things within that individual, that person becomes an asset, because now they're transferring that knowledge to other people within your organization. And that knowledge can then be retained, and then you can expand on that. So even if that person does leave, you're still okay because that knowledge transfer has happened. So that's how you overcome that particular aspect, especially when it comes to people. Now, the 5th factor is very interesting, is can you trade that asset? Can you transfer that asset? Can you actually exchange that asset for some additional value? Now, it's simple. You might buy a building and appreciates over a period of time, and you can then sell it, and that brings you additional funds, for example. Well, yes, you can transfer that asset. But how about a person? It's not that you can transfer a great salesperson. You can't sell them to another organization. So again, that's a tricky one. This is why if you take a look at hockey teams, NBA teams, NFL teams, whatever it may be, well, you can trade people within the organization. You can trade a great quarterback. You can trade a great running back, and you can get more money, less money, whatever it is, but you have the opportunity to trade that asset, to transfer that asset. So sports players are absolutely an asset, right? They bring value, they bring yield. They're a great example to use here. They have growth potential. So when that athlete no longer has growth potential, they're worth less and less and less. You have control over it. Right? The sports team, the GM, the coach, they have control over that asset because they're bound by contracts. And that person, that sports player, can also be transferred. So that asset can be traded, transferred in exchange for value, in exchange for money. So that's a great example for you to think about when you're taking a look at your assets. I don't want you to think of people as something that you can trade and barter and stuff like that. But as a business owner, you definitely want to take a look at the assets in your business, whether it's people, whether it's your brand, your IP, whatever it may be, physical, tangible assets. Pay attention to these 5 factors. Again, does it bring value? Does it bring yield? Do you have control over it? Is there growth potential? And can you transfer the asset? Those are the 5 things you should pay attention to. If you start building and focusing on building assets, you're going to see your ability to scale go up, and you're also going to see the value of your business go up significantly, and you're going to see the longevity and the sustainability of your business go up. So they're all plus factors for you to be able to focus on building assets in your business. So pay attention to that, and pay attention to those 5 factors.